So the rendering part will be a little bit of review, but we'll cover a couple of new things as we go, just in terms of presentation and that kind of stuff. So I'm going to go and import an object. I have this infinite room that we have set up from last time. I have it saved out as an OBJ, so I can import that quickly for these test animations just to give us some kind of background. The bloom is already set on. We're going to turn on ambient occlusion. I'm going to go ahead and take the distance and put this up to something much higher, like 2, 3, something like that. The factor, I'm going to set this up to 2 to kind of give that little bit of a darker occluded feel. And then we'll turn on screen space reflections, motion blur, and then we'll come to our light, tweak that a little bit. So we'll go to our light properties, we'll go to shadow, contact shadows on. We'll go ahead and turn the distance up to something like 1 to make sure that we see those contacts as the ball hits the ground. Really nice. And then I'm just going to crank this up to something like 10,000. Just to make it a little bit brighter. We'll kind of move this off the frame a little bit more. I'm going to scale this up and read this to make the shadows a bit softer. So we'll do something like 3 there. So that's going to give us some soft shadows. My keyboard and my shortcut thing here is going to kind of make this glitch. Bear with me on that one. And then we'll just set this up to be complementary colors. So if you're not familiar with color theory, a very, very basic way to present your stuff is simply do complementary colors, which is essentially I'm going to make this blue, some kind of like darker, maybe desaturated blue a little bit more, maybe a little bit darker. And essentially what we want to do is that's going to be the opposite of our orange, right? And then this is going to be like 80% of the frame, and then our orange is going to be the 20%. And basically whatever is the smaller in terms of color value is where our eye is going to be focused. So we'll play around with that. Maybe I'll darken up the light a little bit. We'll do something like 7500 maybe. The exact values here don't matter too much. There we go. We'll just kind of frame our camera up like this. And then we just have to set our output settings. So we'll go to output properties and then make sure you have your file saved somewhere. And then we'll do // render. Then we'll just do bouncing ball and then do /version1. This is, basic folder structure that I like to use to kind of touch up on this a little bit more. But basically what this does is it puts whatever you're animating into its own folder. And then there's going to be a version in there. And then we're going to have that image sequence living inside of there. So if we ever need to version up, you'll see this a lot later on when we get to the jet. But basically when we version up, we'll essentially be putting that image sequence into a new folder. And then I'll just go ahead and switch this over to JPEG 100%. I'm going to do version 2 since this is the second one I have rendered out. And at this point, we can simply go to our render. You can either do render animation here, or you can do a render motion blur sequence using the plugin. One thing I just want to touch up on really quick before we actually hit the render button is our output properties. So again, 1920 by 1080, that's going to be way, way, way too much, especially for the first time we're going to be rendering this. So we'll just do something like 960 by 540 to make it a little bit smaller, and then we can always up-res after a few different iterations. So I'm going to go ahead and render animation. I'm going to go ahead and hit the render motion blur. Go ahead and render it out like that. There we go. I'll finish rendering, and then we'll just do view animation. Go ahead and play that back. There we go. That's going to wrap up the bouncing ball.